Welcome to the Power and Duty podcast. I'm Carlos Cruz, your host. Join us for some engaging discussions on pressing issues shaping our society today. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Lynn Jackson, a Republican candidate for Utah House of Representatives, District 69. Join us as we dive into key topics surrounding public policy, civic engagement, and the future of our communities. Utah House District 69 encompasses a diverse and vibrant region, characterized by its unique blend of rural landscapes, historical significance, and thriving communities. Stretching across 6 counties in southeastern Utah, being the state's largest district, District 69 is rich in natural beauty with picturesque landscapes ranging from rugged mountains to vast desert expanses. Historically, District 69 has been shaped by industries such as mining, agriculture, and outdoor recreation, each contributing to its distinctive identity. Home to iconic landmarks like Capitol Reef National Park and the San Rafael Swell, the district attracts visitors from far and wide, bolstering its tourism sector and economic vitality. Additionally, the district is known for its strong sense of community and resilient spirit, with residents deeply invested in preserving the heritage and fostering opportunities for future generations. As a pivotal battleground for issues ranging from land management to economic development, Utah House District 69 holds a crucial role in shaping the trajectory of Utah's future. Before we begin, I want to emphasize that Power and Duty does not endorse any political candidate. Our aim is to provide a platform for diverse voices and perspectives, allowing our audience to make informed decisions. With that said, let's delve into our conversation with Mr. Lynn Jackson. Mr. Jackson, welcome to the show. Appreciate you on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So if you can share with us what inspired you to run for the Utah House of District 69.
Sure. It's kind of a combination of things. I've been pretty interested in the politics of Southeast Utah most of my working life. And the last 10 to 12 years have been fairly actively involved in the politics around here. As a Grand County Commissioner, currently I'm been the chair of the our County Republican Party. But along with that interest, what happened was an opportunity presented itself. And that opportunity was Phil Lyman, the incumbent in this job, deciding to run for governor. And I'd known Phil for a decade or longer. And when I found out he was going to run for governor and verified that with him and asked him what he thought my chances might be to get in, fill in behind him, he thought they would be good. He encouraged me. He had me talk to a couple of other people, political leaders in other counties that are within this district, and I got a real positive response from everybody. So it was really a combination of something I would have always been interested in, but as long as Phil was in that job, he was going to hold that job forever. I would not have challenged him. We like what he was doing, but when he stepped down, it sort of opened that up to a situation otherwise would not have been there. So
you're looking to basically continue with his legacy in the House? To
some extent. And I'm going to take these ear pods out. You can still hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Phil and I, we share a lot of common ideas and goals and thought processes for what government ought to be, and particularly out here in the rural parts of southeastern and southern Utah. So will I be as strong and powerful as he was? I don't know. That remains to be seen. Phil was very effective as a legislator, and now he's running for governor. So I think he'll give our incumbent governor a pretty good run for his money. But as it were, you can't run for governor and to refill his House seat at the same time. So it opened that up, and we'll get in there. And I think I can do as good a job as Phil did for the citizens of this district.
So let's talk a little bit about your background. You have extensive experience with the Bureau of Land Management and public lands consulting. How has that influenced your perspective on issues like federal overreach and responsible stewardship?
That's a good question. It's for 45 years now. I've been involved in public lands in this part of the state. I started out with BLM in Hanksville, Utah, and we covered most of Wayne County, most eastern Garfield County, which are in this legislative district now. I started as a geologist, just a field geologist, 4 years in Hanksville, and then I came to Moab, and I spent 28 years here, and I kind of moved up the chain from a district geologist into supervision, and then finished the last nearly decade in management. Was the associate field manager for a number of years. So as time went on, during that 32 years, and particularly once I got into management towards the end of the career, I could see just how profoundly what was going on public lands, federal lands, how profoundly that affected these local counties and communities. When you look at this district, we're 6 counties, and about 80% of the land is owned by the BLM, the federal government. So this is huge. So I had retired in 2010, and some folks approached me about running for the county commission here in Grand County, and I thought about that, and I did. And that really opened my eyes to just how profound what the federal government was doing on these lands impacted our local rural counties. The decisions that were made out there as to where you could develop this resource or that resource, whether it be logging or mining or grazing, completely determined what type of economy any of these small rural towns have. If the government decided you weren't going to have oil and gas leasing and development, you didn't have it. It just didn't happen. It couldn't occur. There wasn't enough private land. So that 4 years on a county commission really opened my eyes quite a bit to just how deep and profound that was. And concurrently, while I was doing that, not long after I retired from the government, I went into public lands consulting, and I got to see it even from that side. Mostly the consulting I'm doing is mostly in the mining industry. We have a tremendous potential for a lithium resource in this part, particularly Grand and San Juan counties. And of course, lithium is one of those metals and materials that if we're ever going to achieve a non-carbon producing type of energy system in the future, it's going to require massive levels of batteries, and lithium is the primary component of batteries. So what I've observed from that consulting, trying to help companies with drilling permits, exploration permits, is it's just one series of red tape snafus, one series of hoops after another to jump through. And again, it's that whole federal nexus of what they decide you can and can't do is what's going to happen in your county, in your rural area. So I think.
And that changes almost every 4 to 8 years anyway.
Yeah, and it does. And and that's another thing I noticed. I started, and this, of course, of dating myself a little bit, but I started when Jimmy Carter was president. And then we went through Reagan and Ford, and we had the first Bush, and then we went into the Clinton 2-term era there, and followed by Bush 2, and then the Obama years, and I retired shortly then into the Obama first term. But what I noticed was these shifts would get greater and greater whenever the White House changed political parties. When you went from a Republican to a Democrat, or the other way around, the shifts in what was happening, what was allowed to happen on BLM got bigger and bigger. The first couple of terms from Carter to Reagan, you didn't see a lot of difference. From Reagan into Ford and even Clinton, but they just got more and more radical to where these presidents would come in, and when they would pick their political appointees to run the Department of Interior, which BLM works under, pick the BLM bosses. They just seem to be kind of real radicalized on one side or the other. And this last administration, although I've not been in a BLM, the work I've done, in consulting, this current administration is as radical as anything I've ever seen. They don't want to talk to the rural counties and states at all. It's just fiat by political machinations back there in D.C., and we're completely bound by what they decide we will and will not do. And so that's kind of in a nutshell. And it'll lead on as I went through some of the questions you had sent down and the topics. We'll talk more about this as we move on, for sure.
All right, so if you can you elaborate on any specific actions you plan on taking to fighting federal overreach? Would you like to see BLM transfer more land over to the state of Utah?
Yes, in the long run. However, I think that is a huge lift. Many years in the making that will require the coordination and the agreement by so many powers. Like Congress would have to agree on that. You'd have to have someone in the White House who would agree on that. You would have to have the governors, the congressional delegations. It's ultimately, I think it's the best if states get to control their own lands. However, being the situation as it's set up now, and realizing getting those lands transferred back to the state is a huge, almost nearly impossible task in my opinion. There's other ways to try and make the system work. In the olden days, mind you, early on in my career, you could sit down with federal managers and as a county, and I was involved on both ends of those, as a county commissioner and as a manager of BLM, and you could usually work out and find some compromises. There would be some give and take. But under this administration, and again, going back to this concept that it just gets more and more radical, they just don't want to talk. And so what we're left with in Utah is litigation. For instance, I was invited to some meetings with the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. A couple of their county commissioners in Garfield and Kane County had asked me to come over to the meetings. And it was very evident that the local BLM people that were at the meetings seemed to be able to want to work with Garfield and Kane County commissions to come up with some good ideas for the management of the Grand Staircase, but they had to take the direction from Washington, and there was just no compromise there. They wanted to shut down 12,000 AUMs, that's grazing. They wanted to, over time, shut down about 90% of the roads. They wanted to eliminate fuel wood gathering. Now, for people who aren't living in a rural area, many people in rural areas, you don't have natural gas lines servicing your home for heat. Your heating in the winter is primarily going to be fuel wood that you've gathered up off public land. So back to your point is it was evident that the BLM was not going to compromise on any of that. So the only other thing that the state and the counties can do is litigate. The same thing happened in Grant County here about 6 months ago. The BLM, through their masters that are running the agency out of D.C., decided to shut down. It was a little over 300 miles of roads here in Grant County. 114 of those miles of roads were what we call RS 2477 roads. These were roads clear back in the 1860s. There was a law that granted states and counties the right of ingress and egress on the federal public domain. And in essence, the argument is the state and the county owned these 114 miles of road, and the BLM just shut them down. Now, there was, again, attempts to compromise, to reach out to work with the BLM leaders in D.C. No compromise. So you're left with litigation, and the governor's office, through his Public Lands Policy Coordination Office, and through the Attorney General's office, is litigating that, saying, look, you can't do this. There's a precedent, there's a a procedure. If you want to shut down RS 2477 roads, then you have to do that through the court system. You can't administratively do that as an agency. So while we're waiting for this larger miracle to occur or not occur, which is at some point in the future these lands coming over to the state, in the meantime you've got to litigate, you've got to be up in interface, and you can say, look, we're willing to have some discussions. We recognize these lands, the value for the public, and if we ever did get these lands back, we would want them to remain open to the public. There's nothing worse than going back east and everything's private. You can't just wander around and travel around in the back roads as you want. You can't camp anywhere you want. And I think most Utahns and conservatives, Republicans, you name it, we have come to enjoy that. We grew up with that, almost a birthright, if you will. So in any event, somewhere down the road, those lands were, the planets aligned, if you will, that those lands were going to come back to Utah. We would insist they remain open public lands. You can't give them to the state, then have them all sold off privately. Now, that's not saying that some, particularly around these smaller rural towns and communities, federal lands, could be sold for as these communities run out of places to expand. One of the problems we have in this vast sea of federal lands is the lack of private lands. In Grand County, for instance, it's 6% of our lands are private. And private lands are what counties and municipalities develop. They allow businesses which generate taxes and generate revenues which provide all government services. We all like fire and police and sewer and water. You get into some counties like San Juan County, I think they're 4%. Garfield County is 2 or 3%. So I think some of these federal lands in the future, in order to provide some space for expansion for the small rural communities, should come over to those communities via the state or however that's going to work out. But as far as a wholesale transfer, if that happens, they have to remain open and public. The reason I'm so hesitant to jump all over that, I mean, one goes back to the Constitution, and I've heard all the arguments that it was never envisioned that the federal government was going to be a large landowner. And out west, in all the 11 states out west, they own nearly 300 million acres of land. But in 1976, Congress passed well, I'll go back even before that. In 1896, when Utah agreed to become a state and petitioned to become a state, Utah agreed to cede any future claim to those federal lands to the federal government. And in return, they got 4 sections in each township and range, sections 2, 16, 32, and 36, and they were ostensibly to help provide a revenue basis for schools. So we sort of gave away and ceded that right to claim those lands. And then if you fast forward to 1976, Congress, after decades, passed a law called the Federal Land Policy Management Act. And in that act, they made a decision. We are going to retain... Our dogs just went off. They made a decision at that point that these lands would be retained in federal ownership in perpetuity, and it would be managed for multiple use. So there's a problem where we ceded our rights. It's probably not the right way to put that, but when we became a state, and then in 1976, Congress said, no, we're done giving away the public domain, which is what they have been doing for many, many years. We're keeping those, we're going to manage them. So a lawsuit to go back now and say, well, we've changed our mind, we actually want those federal lands back, the chances of that succeeding are, I think, pretty slim. Would I support, if I were in a legislature, would I support an effort to do that? I would support it, but I think the opportunity and the potential is pretty slim. So,
yeah, I agree with you. The House, no pun intended, always wins. They have all the leverage. The states really don't have any leverage any way you put it, and there's not much that they can do with it. So, yeah, it's going to be a fight if that's something that the state itself wants to go down in the avenue that they want to go down. So let's talk about money, which is basically everybody's favorite. So we know responsible stewardship of taxpayers' money is a crucial aspect of your platform. How do you intend to ensure transparency and accountability in managing public funds?
The legislature is set up pretty well in that regard. Whenever a legislator, a senator, or representatives get together and they're going to start proposing changes to statute or new statutes, which is more rare, there's always a fiscal analysis done of what that change may involve. Is it going to cost the government money, which is basically, is it going to cost us money? The government has no money; they have our money, and so that's sort of a first flush, if you will, for any potential legislation, as it's handed to a group of fiscal analysts there in the Capitol, and they make some determination. I think the other thing is you just have to be familiar as you're working through that whole legislative process that you're not proposing some change in legislation which is going to add money, a cost to the government. For instance, there's a lot of good things you might want to have this big massive recreation program. Well, that means somebody at the government, natural resources, has to hire a whole bunch of new people, and that's all paid for out of tax money. So I think between the legislative oversight of watching that, being cognizant of what you're doing and making sure you're not proposing things that sound really good but are going to cost the taxpayer money, or things that you can do. I mean, I'm just like any taxpayer. We are taxed to death at this point. I just finished my 2023 taxes, and I just cringe anymore at where our tax. We're taxed at virtually every time we turn around. So anytime I can, if I get in the legislature, anytime I can see what's the words I'm looking for, an opportunity to reduce government spending, maybe to combine roles of government agencies, maybe to eliminate redundant government programs that are costing money, and just being more careful, and be very careful as you go forward proposing legislation that you're not adding to that overall burden on the tax people. We have got to find ways to lessen our tax burden. It's out of hand. So.
Yeah, if we're not careful, we'll end up like California and New York. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that have moved to Utah that are from those states. So. And they understand.
Yeah, and I think, you often hear people say, well, you look at European countries, Norway, Finland, Denmark, and they pay 70-80% of their income goes to taxes. And I don't want to get to that point either. Believe it or not, it's that old conservative value most of us have, that I think we can best decide how to spend our money and what it should be prioritized, and if that's helping people through charitable things, most of us do that. But we need the government out of our pocketbooks. I know that. I'll do everything I can to make sure we eliminate costs whenever possible and not add costs.
So let's go ahead and talk about something that you've probably seen so much change in is probably unbelievable. Affordable housing. And that's a pressing issue in many communities. What are your strategies? What do you propose to address this challenge, particularly in rural areas?
I've got a couple of ideas, but I would start by saying that there isn't one single magic bullet there. Of course, Moab is a prime example of what could happen in a runaway tourism situation where you've got a beautiful location, and there are many beautiful locations in this legislative district, and people come visit. We encourage that. We went looking for tourism after the uranium collapse in the mid-'80s, and people come and they see it, they like it, they have money, they come start buying up your second houses, they buy up your housing stock for second houses, or in many cases they'll buy them to make overnight rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs and stuff. So I would back up and say that there's no one way to handle it all, but there's a variety of mechanisms of ways. At the very base is your economy and diversification of your economy. And that goes right back into this problem that we talked about with federal lands, where they decide the economy. Grand County has this marvelous potential for oil and gas. We've got this marvelous potential for lithium development. But if we're not allowed to do that, that's a component of the economy you don't have. And those mining and mineral jobs, from my experience, typically pay pretty good. So what's happened in a town like, in a county like Grand County, is now 95% of our economy is tourism based. Well, that works great if you're a business owner. If you had the wherewithal 20 years ago to buy the land to build a business, or now if you're a multimillionaire and you can afford to buy the land and do the business and build a business, you can do really well if you're a good businessman. The problem we have is the service industry, the people who work in those jobs, the people who work in motels, the people who work in restaurants, the people who guide mountain bikes or four-wheelers. That's the problem they have, isn't affording those homes, because we've shut out other forms of economic development. Out-of-towners and have come in and bought up the housing stock. So you've decreased the housing stock. Well, in any market-based system, it's a supply and demand thing. When the supply's not there, the costs go up. So one of the things, and I'm kind of rambling around here, is you've got to look for ways to diversify your economy besides just having a recreation economy. That's a help. There's other ways, and I'm not huge on this, but I've seen it be very successful, and that's government subsidizing some of the costs that go in with building. For instance, my youngest daughter participated in Moab in this program about 15 years ago called Self-Help Building Houses. And what that was is that there would be a neighborhood that would homes would be developed, smaller homes, 1,500 square feet, 1,200, and what would happen is the people that were approved for these homes would actually help build them, and they would provide about 30% of the labor to build those houses. Now, it wasn't doing the electric, it wasn't doing the plumbing, but most people can put insulation in walls. Most people can do roofing, put in windows, they can paint. And what that ended up doing was so the developer that came in and did all the concrete and the framing and electric,
Right.
there you go, that's a good way to put it. They were able to reduce their costs enough because they had this free labor to come in and do stuff they otherwise would have had to pay for, that it made these homes so that these younger people could afford them. I think when she closed out the loan on her house, it was something like $130,000 in that ballpark. And this was probably 15 years ago. Those homes now are worth $500,000 and $600,000. So that's another way you can help is government subsidizing things like the building. Recently, the legislature passed some program where they were providing some, and I don't know all the details, some incentive for builders that was lowering the builders' cost to build the homes, with the idea they could subsequently charge less for the homes. I think that's a good idea. Again, by itself, it won't work. That's just going to benefit builders, but also the government, I think, should be providing subsidies for lower income people. And those subsidies could come in a way of lower mortgage rates. The government could come in and pick up a couple of points on a mortgage. And of course, that's a big problem we have right now, not just in rural, but all across the state, are mortgage interest rates. People just can't afford them. So we've got to get interest rates down. We've got to look for economically diversifying our economies to the extent we can, utilizing the resources we have in the southern end of the state. Another very specific idea I have is using TRT revenues. Now, they are transient room tax revenues, and they are anytime you come to a resort area and you vacation, you're a tourist and you get a motel room, 7, 8, 9, 10% of your bill goes back to that county. Goes some to the state, mostly to the county, and it goes right into their coffers. And for instance, in Grand County, right now our TRT revenues are probably well over half of our county budget. They're like $10 million a year coming in. And the idea between TRT is that the tourists come in and they pay these taxes, and then that local community, that county, is supposed to be able to have that revenue to help offset the impacts from tourism. For instance, in Grand County, we have to have a landfill that's 4 times the size of what we would normally need for our steady population because of all the tourism. So, well, it costs more money to run a landfill. We have to have more sheriff employees and search and rescue employees. So one of the things the TRT will currently allow you to do is to pay for things like your landfills, and we do use it to help our sheriff's department. But I think it's time that if us rural areas get together in these 6 counties and say we would like to even take what we can use TRT revenue for to even another level, and particularly when you get in an area like Moab in Grand County or Kanab in Kane County, you can see it happening there too. That's just being flooded with tourism and second home owners. Let's make some of that TRT revenue available for local developers, local, not out of state, not out of town developers, to go out and build subdivisions of affordable housing and offset some of their infrastructure costs for whenever you build a development, you've got to put in water and sewer and gas lines. And so maybe some of that TRT revenue we can use that to help offset some of those costs. Again, the idea being you help builders and developers offset costs, then they can sell for lower prices and more affordable prices. So it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all. There's some stuff that's worked very well, and I think it's just everybody pitching in. But anyway, that kind of answers that.
Yes, you did very thoroughly. I really appreciate that. So let's talk about something else that's what I believe is very related to one's domain, and that's the Second Amendment rights. You've mentioned your commitment to preserving the Second Amendment rights. How do you plan to balance this with ensuring
that was a
safety?
good question, and I was looking that over, and I kept getting hung up on the word balance. And not that it was intended to hang me up, I kept focusing. I said, how do you balance a right? A right is a right. To me, balancing means kind of giving and taking here, and to me, it's not so much of a balance. I focus on a part of the Second Amendment that says shall not infringe. Other people focus on well-regulated and this, that, and the other. You shall not infringe upon this right. That being said, we have, I don't think we have, in my opinion, a gun problem in the country. What we have is a mental health problem. We have a serious mental health problem, and one could point to an array of things that's causing from the breakdown of nuclear families in the last generation or two, homes without fathers, children without direction, the mass social media that's just bombarding our children 24/7 from every direction, a 24-hour media news coverage, and people are just on edge, and it's hard enough for us adults to manage some of this stress. I can't even imagine growing up, and I have grandkids, 12, 13, 14 years old. I can't even fathom what it's like for these kids. So all of this together has created, in my opinion, this societal illness, and guns are just when they want to lash out, it's an easy thing to go do. Get a gun, for the most part. So for me, we really need to focus a lot on the mental health of what's going on in this country that's causing these people to melt down so badly that they think their only way to fix things is just to go shoot up schools or shopping malls or whatever the case may be. Now, do I agree? I agree, and in background checks, people that are mentally unstable should not have access to weapons. And so to the extent that could be shored up a bit, I'm okay with that. I know when I bought weapons, most of my adult life, I go through a background check, and if you're good to go, you're able to get a purchase a weapon. But so I think we can't penalize the 90 or 95 or I don't even know 98% of responsible gun owners with you can't penalize them for the actions of a few people that are just have some serious mental illness. So I understand, I get people being concerned with that, but to me I would put more of the focus on programs to help people to screen people that probably shouldn't have weapons. If you look back, it seems like just the last 2 or 3 years, whenever we've had these mass shootings, they're finding out that a lot of these people should have been on radars, and in fact were on radars.
Yeah, they were.
And nothing was done. So, but even that's a slippery slope. How do you screen people without, it's scary sometimes when you put the government in charge of anything, right? One of my favorite sayings is, if you put the federal government in charge of the Sahara Desert, they would be out of sand in 5 years. And it's the same thing. So that's a slippery slope. But I think we can all agree that, at least most of the people I know, that we need to do a better job at screening and looking for these signs of people who are about to go over the edge and do some of this crazy stuff. And we need to keep our Second Amendment intact, shall not be infringed. I don't even it scares me to think of where our country would be right now if we didn't have the Second Amendment. I think that a lot of people who would tend to think in totalitarian frames of mind for how the government ought to run, in the back of their mind, they know we're a very highly armed citizenry, and 98% of it you're not ever going to have a problem with. But if you do, you're going to have a problem. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just look at Haiti right now and what's going on down there. You look at China for the last 50 years and many of the other countries that follow socialist style government. No second amendment there, no protections whatsoever. So yes,
I think our country's the last one standing
on
in the way of that. And I don't know of anywhere else in the world where they enjoy the right we have, and we're sort of the last bastion. And if we lose that, I don't even like to think. The problem, and the people who put our founders, we call them, the people who put our government together 250 plus years ago, they were pretty smart people, and they knew you had to limit the power that people seek. It's human nature, and it has been since the dawn of civilization. You just have these people who want power and control over everybody. And they saw the wisdom of that Second Amendment. It's like, at the end of the day, that's our final fallback defense. So I've probably talked quite a bit about that, but yeah, I'm a staunch defender and will remain a staunch defender of the Second Amendment.
And I like your comment about the founders. One thing a lot of people do not know or not aware is that as our founders were developing this new nation, they were living that tyranny. I believe it was King George was the one that was hunting them down at that time. So imagine trying to build a nation while being hunted down at the same time and starting a revolution with a new army.
Most of these guys were some of the wealthier people. They put their entire fortunes and livelihoods. But these were learned men for the most part, and I'm sure if it happened nowadays there'd be women there too, but back then they were very learned men. They had studied every form of government, from the Greeks to the Romans to the Persians, and they knew at the end of the day you had to have a government that curtailed the power that men seemed to seek over one another, and they did a pretty dang good job of it. So
yes, I would agree. So from this topic, I think this is perfect to talk about education, in which people are not getting whatsoever. I think we can call it indoctrination for a lot of places, but we know it's fundamental for our future of our society. And how do you intend to support local control of education while ensuring quality in schools?
Uh, I'll start by saying my wife was a school teacher, elementary school teacher for 30 years. And so when deep questions of education come up, she's my go-to, right? She lived it, she saw it. That being said, my philosophy is local control. This whole federal system of Common Core doesn't work. But I'm also a little bit leery of state government saying this is what you will and will not teach in your schools. I believe at the end of the day, parents are the best people to know and trust with how their children should be educated. So I think I think we need to up our education game, and this may be where a legislature could step in. It's like, look, you have to have some science classes. You have to have some history classes. You have to have some civics courses. As a geologist, I would say you have to have an earth history course so that when the government comes in and tells you they can control the climate of the planet, you will know that that is nonsense. Right now, you don't know that. People don't know that. They think the government can control our climate for us. Well, we can't. So I think the role of a state legislature is just to set some, here's a core of what you need to be teaching, but then you leave that up to local school districts and parents to decide how that's going to be done. And you know, on the one hand, you're going to get you won't get a lot of consistency. I live in a very highly democratic county, very progressive county is Grand County. They're going to have one idea on how they ought to teach their children, and it's going to be different than what you may see in San Juan County or Kane County, which are far more conservative over there. But you know, I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, these are our children, and we should be the ones that decide, how they get it now, how they get educated. Now, another part of that question was, what do I think about, or maybe I misread that DEI and all that equity stuff. My thoughts there is everybody gets a level playing field to start with. I'm absolutely committed to that. Everybody gets to start from the same place. What I don't agree in government doing is guaranteeing everyone has an equal outcome. That needs to be based on the amount of work somebody's willing to put in and abilities in that. So, but local governments, local parents should control it, and everybody, all school children should have an equal shot coming out of the gate, regardless of their backgrounds. So,
well, we know what a good education system can do. Just look at the 40s, 50s, and 60s and what that did for consumerism, all these ideas, all these new technologies that came out. We put a man on the moon, got him back safely, and that was done with NASA and NASA contracting basically 90% of their work out to corporations
right.
to do that. So while government, I think basically government just set the vision and they gave the funds. They can basically do the same thing again today. Let's go to Mars. And they can go ahead and set the funding and let everybody else, but it starts with the education, like you were saying.
I think that's a good point. I think you really hit it on the head. Let the government provide the vision, but let the local people and parents decide how you meet some of that stuff. And then the other thing is, of course, our system of higher education. And I wish I had an answer for that. It's broken. I mean, I look at my college education back in the 70s, and I look at what these colleges are doing now. It goes back a long ways, and people who understood. I don't want to drift too far into all the conspiracy stuff, but there is an effort to dumb our society down. I'm absolutely convinced of it. And we send these kids to universities now. I wouldn't send a child to a university. I would send them to a trade school somewhere. I would send them to university if they were going to get an engineering degree, or maybe they wanted to go into medicine. But the rest of what's happened with our system of higher education is just abysmal. And a lot of it is this DEI crap and this woke nonsense. And I wish I knew how to fix that. But I think a lot of it starts with our own kids, our own children, and we teach them how to recognize nonsense when they hear it, and then maybe they can fix it once they get into these schools. And that's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, I think a lot of things come back to the family itself, which is
I
important.
do, and there seems to be, we've just lost this whole nuclear connection. I remember when I was young, parents, all my friends, and boy, if there were divorced parents, that was a big deal. Now it's second nature to these kids.
You expect
now
it
they
now.
expect it, and you know it ties into our as a society, our lack of belief in God and country and family, and I think fundamentally most all of the ills that I see in a country, all that's at the base of all of it. So anything we can do to shore those fundamental societal systems up is a good thing, in my opinion.
I think sooner or later, younger generations are going to see that the nuclear family was something that was healthy. It was a lot healthier than what they're experiencing now. You don't have to live life, alone, raising children alone, working 2 or 3 jobs just to feed the mouths. There's a way to where responsibly and as an adult you can go and you can find someone out there that you can connect with and spend the rest of your life with, or at least a majority of your life with, to the point. And it's amazing how we've come this far here to where the pendulum has swung. I think it's about time that the pendulum started swinging.
I hope so. And there
to the
seems to
upside.
be a little. You read a little bit about that in the news of Gen X or whatever they call themselves now, are starting to embrace some of those. They look back on the good old days, right, when our mothers stayed home and raised us, and our fathers went and worked. And I thought, well, that was kind of cool, Wow, look at that, a mom raising her children and a dad working jobs. So I think you're right, and pendulums, societal pendulums, do have a tendency to swing back and forth, and let's just hope we can get them swung back into something that's sustainable for our future, for our children, for our grandkids. So,
But as long as we don't hit a major war, we should be good to go, because we know once you go to war, especially when you have the Revolutionary War and then the Civil War, a lot of men were lost and a lot of single mothers then, and that's understandable to have a single family there. But nowadays it's more government caused single family homes, which is a shame as well. In addition to all the noise that's happening, you have TikTok and everything else out there, which is just creating noise, and people are giving each other bad advice when it comes down to relationship. If you just watch YouTube and TikTok, you'll just cringe at some of the things that people are saying, and they say it with an honest face.
Well, it gets down to that education component. People no longer have the basic education and understanding to know when they're being lied to and BS'd, and it's just like this is 24/7 onslaught. We live in an era. The information at our fingertips is phenomenal. I never would have envisioned this as a youngster, but the problem is you don't know what to believe, and if you don't have a good core base of values, not only home values and family values, but educational values, how are you ever going to be able to tell when you're being deceived? So,
No, I agree with you there. So we could probably talk
good.
on this subject for hours. So let's
All right,
just move
sure.
on real quickly. So let's move on to infrastructure. Now, infrastructure development is crucial for the growth and sustainability of communities. I think we can agree on that. So how do you propose to prioritize and invest in infrastructure projects in District 69 to enhance economic opportunities and the simple quality of life for residents?
Well, we've touched on that a little bit with I think using TRT revenues.
Yeah, you hinted at
Let
that.
me even back up a little bit about that and talk about this district just a little bit. It's Emory, or excuse me, most of Emory County, Wayne County, Garfield County, Kane County, and I'm swinging around here, coming up through San Juan and Grand. 28,000 square miles. when I first started considering running in this district and I took a look at that, I went and Googled the size of states. If we were a state in this district, we would be the 39th biggest state in the country. So we're bigger than 10 states. We're basically a third of the landmass of Utah in this district. Now, I bring that up because within this district, we have 4 of the 5 national parks in the state. We have these 2 monstrous, in my opinion, illegal national, million-acre plus national monuments. We are a recreation economy. And we're the playground for the Wasatch Front. We're the playground for the Front Range. And we're the playground for a lot of places people visit from around the world. So if you're going to be a playground, that's great. But you have to have infrastructure. You have to have roads to get people there. You have to have reasonable airport facilities. And granted, we don't need jet ports in every one of our little teeny towns. Our biggest town, Moab, is the biggest town in this district. And we may have 10,000 people here. So you have to have good access. If you're going to live off of tourism, then you have to have access for tourism, for tourists to get here. And when they get there, you've got to be able to have the infrastructure to take care of things they need for water. You've got to have search and rescue facilities and infrastructure in place. You've got to have solid waste infrastructure in place. So I think if we go back, we look at how we can use the TRT revenues to help put that infrastructure in place. In addition to larger infrastructure projects that the state legislature would benefit from, the whole state would benefit from. There's always a benefit to upgrading roads and highways for interstate commerce and the like. So in essence, that's what we've got to do. We've got to get that TRT funding and build that infrastructure. And again, it goes back to figuring out how we're going to get out of this federal nexus where we can actually use some of our federal lands out there to generate our own revenue and tax revenue off of mining development or timber development or whatever other kind of resource we've got in an area that can withstand it. So it's a big thing. I've had a couple of meetings. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I conducted 7 meetings around the district. And interestingly, in a couple of the areas, I kept hearing this theme called, if you're going to play, you're going to pay. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And what people were saying is, we're okay being a playground for the Wasatch Front. We're okay, motels and restaurants, but if you're going to come down here and play, you have to pay. Because between the federal government and all this other stuff, you've killed opportunity for other economic development. So if you're going to play, you have to pay so that we can pay for this infrastructure. So I think we look at opportunities there. TRT's the primary one. At some point, I want to have some time, and I'd like to see just how much of the other 5 counties in this district rely on TRT revenue. I know in Grand County it's phenomenal. I expect Kane County over there where Kanab is approaching where we're at as far as TRT being a main source of their county revenue. Kane County is a lot like Moab. There's just kind of one city in the county. It's Kanab, and I use the city loosely. I think there's probably 3,000 people there, maybe 4. But there aren't any other towns, and so I see. My father lives in Kanab, and he's lived there for about 25 years. Originally we're from Carbon County up around Price. He's lived there. He retired there 25 years ago, and I've watched this transition going on in Kanab. They're just a decade behind where Moab is, and one of the things I think I can help them is say, look, the other refrain I hear traveling around this district is, we'd like some tourism development, but we don't want to be Moab. I get that. And I think with some of what I've seen in Moab, I've been here 42 years, I think there's things you can do. You can't stop it, but you can certainly mitigate some of the impact of a tourism kind of getting overrun. And anyway, so we touched on infrastructure there. It's it's finding the funding and developing that funding to have the infrastructure that you need. If you're going to be tourist destinations, you've got to have certain infrastructure, or the tourists won't come. If the tourists don't
Right,
come,
exactly.
we're dead in the water. We have
Yeah, you
nothing.
have nothing.
When COVID hit, probably about April or May of 2020, and I'm not kidding. We've got pictures. You could go lay downtown in the middle of the highway in Moab, and there was nobody there. Now, the government came in and paid a lot of money to help people get through payroll and stuff like that. What would happen if something like that went on for 2 years? We're done. I lived in Moab. When I moved here, it was a mining community, uranium mining community in 1982. And I saw what happened when factors completely beyond anybody's control took away the uranium industry. Reagan came in, the end of the Cold War. There was no longer any requirements for nuclear uranium. 3 Mile Island happened. Everybody got scared of nuclear. Our economy completely crashed. 60% of the businesses went out of business. Half the homes were vacant. And I look now 40 years later, and even at my time on a county commission, I would warn people. I said, no, we've got to do this. We can't support the BLM when they want to stop oil and gas leasing in our area. We can't support them. We've got to fight. Because I saw what happened when a one industry economy went south. And buddy, there's so many things that could happen in this world that would do that to us again. It scares me. So.
Yeah, it's basically a shock to the system, and the system doesn't know how to deal with it because it's not prepared for it. But a gradual shutdown or slowdown, I think it would be able to handle it better. But it goes back to what you said. If they want to play, they'll pay. And if you look at all the gorgeous areas that Utah have that people want to go, they are more than willing
Most
to
of
pay.
them are. Yeah, I agree with that. I was having a discussion with some people had a meeting in Bicknell, and I was bringing that point up, and one of the guys at the meeting says, "Oh no, if you add another $5 to somebody's room, they'll quit coming." And it's like, no, they won't. They don't. When you're out on vacation and you're paying $250, $300 a night for a room, another $5 or $10 makes no difference. You're on vacation.
No, because they want to be there.
Vacation money is like free money. We're all go on vacation, and we know what happens. I'm out here to have a good time. I'm not going to worry about that. So yeah, I don't think it stops people. I suppose there may be some limit, but I've seen in Moab last year they were charging $500 and $600 a night for what I would consider standard motel rooms.
Yeah, it depends on the economy as well. Like you said, back in COVID, that cost is not going to fly. But when the economy is doing well, people are doing well, even if they have to tighten up a little, they will still pay because that's where they want to be. Like, I just need to get away from all of this and just go somewhere where I can just enjoy life.
Stars at night and get out in the back country and be alone. And like I say, this district is... it's the most, there's a lot of beautiful parts of Utah. I've been all over the state. I've been all over the West. But this district is beautiful. I would put this 28,000 square miles up against anybody's 28,000 square miles anywhere in the world for its beauty. I mean,
it is a very diverse
Bryce
region.
Arches, Canyonlands,
Yes.
Capitol Reef National Park, the Henry. It's just, anyway, I'm off topic. I've been, like I said, once you get me wound up, I can go for quite a while. This stuff is near.
No, that's good. That's good. That's what I want to hear.
Near.
So let's go a little bit off topic, and let's talk about the importance of keeping motorized roads and trails open. So I'm going to say this B word again. Please don't hate me. But how do you plan to balance recreational access with environmental conservation efforts?
In this particular case, balance is a little better word. Because we're not talking about some fundamental right, that we had. I think we've more than achieved that balance. To me, we're now skewing everything way to the left of shutting roads down. And the reason I say that is this. When I was still in BLM, about 2005, we started a region-wide resource management plan. And we started that. We worked with the counties, in this particular case, Grant County and San Juan. We inventoried all the roads with GPS units. Four-wheel drive clubs could go out, give us this data. We would field check it where we needed to. And for part of the 2008, a companion document was called a travel management plan. So we did the bigger management plan. It's like, here's where we'll lease, here's where we won't lease. Here's where we'll have this type of recreation, here's where we'll have that kind of recreation. And along with that, we made a travel management plan. At that time, we shut down half of the inventoried roads in Grand County. The numbers had come in, there were right around 6,000 miles of inventoried roads and trails. We shut down half of them. So that balance was there. But what I see from the extreme environmental community is they're never happy with the balance. They want it all shut down.
Oh, there's no balance with them. They're just angry.
And
there's no
so
balance.
What they've done is they play the long game. And so we did that travel management plan in 2008. So what, about 12 years from that, 13, 14 years. Now they're back doing travel management plans on the Grand Staircase, Escalante National Monument, the Bears Ears. They're doing one on the San Rafael Swell. They just did this one in Grand County. So we're far past balance, in my opinion. And now we're just fighting to retain every dang square mile, or not square mile, linear mile that we can, or it'll all be gone. They'll take another chunk of it now, and in 10 years, they'll take another chunk of it. And you know what? I really had a eye-opening experience when I was on our county commission. Congressman Rob Bishop was our congressman at that time, and he had this program going called the Public Lands Initiative. And it was all 7 counties over on the eastern side of the state, Grand County included. And since I had come out of public land management, I was on a commission. They said, oh, well, you know stuff about this. You kind of take our lead. And so I spent a couple of years working with all the environmental groups, mining groups, four-wheel drive groups, sportsmen's groups. And one group I found that absolutely would not compromise on one thing were the environmental groups. I'd say, look, we want to resolve the wilderness issue, and again, I'll just use Grand County because I was focused there. There were 300,000 acres. Grand County's just short of 2 million acres in size. There were 300,000 acres of areas that had been proposed for wilderness by BLM. We had studied those. We had spent years. We come up with that. And then during the Clinton administration, he let the environmentalists double that number. And so I would sit down with these, and I won't mention names. I could, but I won't. Sit down.
No need to.
I would sit down with these environmental leaders. I'd say, look, we'll if we'll do this over here, if you'll let go of this over there, and they wouldn't even consider it. They said, why would we give you back the county 1 inch of these lands for wilderness? Because by law, even though they're not designated, I'm making air quotes, formal wilderness by Congress, by law, the FLPMA, Federal Land Policy Management, you have to manage them like wilderness until Congress acts. We know Congress is never going to act. Therefore, what possible reason would we have to compromise? Man, my eyes were opened so wide. And then they would say, and at the end of the day, if you don't give us other stuff that we want, they wanted other areas, more roads, shut down, then we'll just have President Obama declare national monuments on his way out the door. So the balance is far gone. There is no balance. We are being managed by extreme environmental groups, and they're playing a long game, and it's just every 10 years they're just going to take half of what you got left and half of what you got. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. So if I'm in this job, I'm going to fight every road closure they make. Because the BLM, we all over this district, we know where there were bad roads, and we shut them down. You know, a road going right up the middle of of a wash with thousands of live wash or something. Fine, you move those, you shut it down, you move it up on a bench somewhere. I'm not gonna compromise on any of that if I get in there. These roads,
Yeah, they've lost their act.
these roads are our lifeblood. And I tell you, man, you get me talking on go all day on this stuff. The roads, the roads in in this district, I'm going to say 90% of them were created by mining companies in the 50s and 60s. And they went, and it's one of the reasons we're so popular is because you can come down here with your side by side of your Jeep, and you can take a road clear back into the middle of nowhere, where otherwise you would have a 15 or 20 or 30 mile backpack, right? And you're not going to, well, some young people can. You can't.
I won't. I'll tell you that right
Can.
now.
I used
Not
to
me. I'm not the
backpack
one.
when I was young. You know, I wouldn't want to leave anybody listening with the idea that I don't think some lands should be protected. They should. We'll all agree to that. There are parts of our planet worthy as a wise and sound society to set aside. But where do you stop? This other side won't stop until it's all shut down. And so the days and the years of compromise in my mind are over. We've compromised everything we can, and we need to, I'm going to go French here, we need to fight like hell to keep access to what we've got left. End quote.
I agree. So, so if you can you discuss your vision for economic development within your district and how it aligns with your campaign promises? You don't have to go too deeply into it.
Yeah, I don't know how deep you can go into it. We've covered so much of this. A lot of our economic development is determined by what the federal government will and won't allow. And so you don't know where that's going. You can fight it, you can litigate it, maybe you win some, you're going to lose some, but it's too difficult you can't make plans on it. It's like you can't say, oh, well, we know we've got, lithium is a prime example. We may be sitting on millions of tons of lithium, but you can't plan on being able to develop that. If we could plan on it, we could set up economic diversity for jobs and central assessed taxes and that kind of stuff. You can't plan on it. You just have to fight it and hope. So we're kind of stuck with our recreation industry. And again, I don't want to say we're not. We're glad we have it. It's feed.
You have
It
something.
feeds a lot of people. There are some problems with it. As I mentioned earlier, if you own a business, you don't have a problem if you're a good business owner, but if you're not fortunate enough to have the capital to build businesses or the know-how, you're struggling in our little rural areas. So, you know, we've just got to figure out a way to keep what we have going. You look at Grand County, I think, and I don't have the numbers, but what I can see, half of our economy is motorized recreation. Yet we have a whole segment of our society and a whole lot of people in Grand County that would shut that down. They don't like the noise, and they don't like the fact that they can get into the backcountry. So you've got to continue to develop what you do have and what you have available to you. You got to help people. You got to help people. We got to figure out the housing problem. You know, we got to have people that can afford to live there and build families there and have jobs there. You know, and that's economic development. Just a sustainability of the economy you have for your citizens is economic development. So,
Do you know, and this is just off topic basically, but in Salt Lake City, the House, are they doing anything to help with your area
oh
and
yeah,
developing it?
yeah. Could they do more? Yes, I think so. But the governor has this program. It's called the Government's Office of Economic Development, and they do great things. The legislature sets aside money for them. They help small businesses. They incubate small businesses, and of course, in the tourism industry, that's going to be motels, restaurants, side by side bike rentals, and things like that. So, yeah, I would say they do a pretty good job. But I think we could do better. When you look at the makeup of the legislature, there's between the Senate and the legislature, I think there's 104 of them. And there's only 15 of them from rural Utah. The rest of them are all jammed up there on the Wasatch Front. So, of course, that's where their focus is. And my hat's off to the governor and legislative leaders. They do see this. They've come down with funding in the past for high-speed internet, cable, and things of that nature. They help us build university extensions. Utah State is real great. We have a university extension in Moab. There's one in Price, which is out of my district. There's one in Blanding. I think that needs to be expanded over to the west side of the district in places like Kanab or Panguitch. The governor and his team are pretty good at have been good, and the legislature is helping out. But we could always use more help. If you want to play, you got to pay. That will be my model.
Well said. So I think you've touched on this before. Well, I know you touched on this before, but do you think there's any other challenges that the communities are facing in your area?
I do. Healthcare is always a challenge in rural Utah, and we haven't talked a lot about that. And the more remote your area, the bigger challenge that is. And I think specifically of like the Dene peoples down on the Navajo reservation. They live in some very remote areas, and so I think we need to figure out a better way to provide health care for our really remote rural areas. Grand County here in Moab, we've got a pretty good health care system. They're pretty good in Kanab and the bigger cities, mind you. But you get in these really small little towns, and it's more difficult. It's hard to get doctors and trained medical people to come because they can't make the kind of money they can in a big city. So I think healthcare is something and I'm not a healthcare expert. My idea is when you get in and looking at legislation to help you with things like that, you bring in the experts, right? And you say, okay, we need to fix this. How can we do this? But I think healthcare is something we need to look closer at.
So I believe healthcare, in the matter that we're talking about, it's related to basically civic engagement, neighbor helping neighbor. So we know that's crucial for a society or even a community to thrive. So how do you plan to engage with your constituents and ensure their voices are heard in the legislative process?
One of the things I decided when I ran for this job, and I gave it some thought because of the size of this district, it's a full-time job. And it's a full-time job because the only way you're going to engage with people is to travel and meet with people. You go to city council meetings, you go to county commission meetings, you hold town hall meetings in these areas. And so if you don't have the ability, like I do, because I'm pretty much semi-retired and dedicated, it's a full-time job. And that's because of the amount of travel. It's just so big. It's a 800 round trip from Moab over through Panguitch, Kanab, back through Monument Valley and Blanding is nearly 800 miles. And so you've got to be willing to put in the travel, to meet with people. One of the rural legislators I know pretty well, is a good friend, Carl Albrecht, does during the legislature, is he has an email. And anybody of his constituents, and he covers like Sevier and Paiute, he's not in our district, but he puts together a weekly email. Senator or Congressman John Curtis does the same thing. He calls it his highs and lows. It's a very effective way. People can sign up for those newsletters, and you can say, well, this is what we worked on this week. Here's what worked, here's what didn't. So I'm very much interested in my viewpoint is I'm going to work for the people in this district. I'm not going up there to tell them what they need to do. Now, I have a pretty good background. I've spent 45 years of my life living and playing and working in this district. I have a fairly good idea, but I also am smart enough to realize all of these counties are a little bit different. And there's not a one-size-fits-all. And so you got to get out and travel and meet with them, find out what their needs. Go meet with the Dene people. Where do you need water systems upgraded? Where do you need your roads upgraded? Healthcare, the whole 9 yards, and you've got to put in the time to do it. And don't forget, there's no salary that goes with this job. None. In fact, the people I talked to said you will lose money doing this job. It will come out of your pocket. And I'm okay with that, because this is my home. This is where I'm from. You asked me one of the first questions, what inspired me, and this is my home. I want to work for the people. I want to be engaged in what's going on. I see too much craziness going on, particularly at our federal level, and I don't want to sit on the sidelines. I've got a lot of background. I've got a lot of expertise I can bring to the table, and I think I can help our people. I hope that's my goal anyway.
Well, I like to hear that. So
Sure.
Before we let you go, what message would you like to convey to the voters of District 69 as they consider their choices in the upcoming election? Mr. Jackson,
Thank you.
I'll give you the last word.
I appreciate that. Vote for experience. Experience counts. And I think my background at the federal level, at the county level, working with the legislature from the county level, experience is what's going to help us. It's not a job to go in and learn on a job. You can't do it. If you're learning as you're going, you're not helping the citizens of the county. So I'd say look closely at the experience of myself and the other candidates. I can tell you unequivocally that the Democratic candidate has zero experience in any of this. None. And I've got two Republican competitors, and when you stack us up one against the other, if you're looking for experience, I'm the guy you want to vote for, and I will work hard for you folks. Thank you.
And where can people find more information about you?
You can go to my website. It is lynn4house.com. I also have a Facebook page, an open Facebook page called Lynn Jackson for District 69. I think that's the name of it. Just you go Google or just search my name under Facebook, and you'll see that come up. And there's contact information there. If you want to reach out, anyone wants to reach out and talk to me, I'm just more than glad. As you can see, this stuff is near and dear to my heart, and I can. You said, well, we talked about the lighting when we started. It's dark now.
I've noticed that.
Talked to you, Carlos.
I like that. Mr. Jackson, thank
you very
much
much,
for your time.
Carlos. It's my
Good luck
pleasure.
with your campaign.
Bye now.
As we come to the end of today's episode, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Jackson for his insightful contributions to our discussion. Your perspective has shed light on critical issues facing Utah, House District 69, and we're grateful for your dedication to public service. As a reminder to our audience, the power of informed citizenship lies in your hands. As we navigate the complex landscape of public policy and civic responsibility, let's continue to engage, question, and advocate for the future we envision. To our audio listeners, we invite you to stay engaged with the Power and Duty podcast by subscribing to our show. Your support and feedback drive the direction of our content, so don't hesitate to reach out and share your thoughts with us. And to our video audience, thank you for joining us on our channel. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to catch all our future episodes, including exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Your engagement empowers us to continue fostering informed citizenship and advocacy for positive change. Together, let's continue the conversation and work toward building a more just and blind society. Remember, the power change lies within each of us. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay empowered. Thank you for being a part of our community. We'll see you on the next show, exploring more ways to shape a better future together.